Databank. So let's see. The basic idea underlying our research project is to capture the huge corpus of knowledge which is right now spread across thousands and tens of thousands of brains. All right? And the goal is to build a web of facts about past societies, and I'll explain what I mean by facts in a minute, that are connected. This web is connected along multiple dimensions, spatial, temporal, thematic, and conceptual dimensions. And then we will use this web of facts to test and reject theories. So by the time we're done, I hope there will be a whole cemetery of dead theories, and I will count my success by the number of the gravestones. But that's not the only use, of course. It will also be used in educational and informational ways, but let's just focus on that. All right, so today I will be talking about one particular aspect of what we are doing is the evolution of social complexity. And so one of the most basic facts of human evolution is that during the last 10,000 years, the scale of human societies has increased by a truly astronomical way, by 6 or 7 orders of magnitude. All right? And now here you have a rough sequence of when the first type of more complex polities appeared. And of course, they appeared in one place in the world. All right? But you know that social complexity evolved independently at least half a dozen times. At least states have evolved independently across the globe in at least half a dozen places, maybe more. And also you know that the pace of evolution has been quite different in different world regions. So Ian Morris is not here, of course, but he is the one who has made, he became famous by showing the social development graphs between Eastern and Western Eurasia. So in a way, what we are doing is doing somewhat similar, but much more broad coverage in terms of regions. And also, I would argue, I wish he was here so I wouldn't say it behind his back, that we are doing it on a much more solid factual basis. Right, so eventually we want to capture all the theoretically relevant information about past society that exists. By theoretically relevant, I mean either variables that you want to explain, like social complexity, or variables that people have hypothesized can help us explain what we want to explain. Right, so we are not planning to put everything in the database, but we want the database to have all the theoretically relevant knowledge. Now that will take us quite a long time, and so you have to, for the expediency sake, you have to sample. You have to sample both where we collect information and also what kind of variables we focus on. So here is our world sample 30. What we've done is we stratified the sample. We selected 30 points on the globe, and they're stratified in 2 ways. First of all, there are 10 world regions here, and so we sample each of them. And then within each world region, what we do, we certify by the antiquity of complex societies or state-like societies, right? So typically, for example, let's take North America. So in North America and Northern and Central America, which is one region, obviously the Mesoamerica is going to be where you had the longest history of complex societies, so we chose Oaxaca Valley. Then we go to the opposite end, so we chose basically Finger Lakes, the Iroquois configuration, and then something in between with the Cahokia. So that's basically the idea. And of course, you cannot compare, for example, Hawaii, which is the most complex point in the Pacific and Ocean in Australia, to, let's say, Upper Egypt, right? They are completely different. The whole point is not that that high complexity points are comparable across regions, but the whole point is a sampling scheme whose goal is to maximize the amount of variance as much as possible. And we do that by making sure we don't miss any major world regions, and we maximize by looking at both societies which were basically non-state until European colonizers arrived, and the societies which were some of those pristine, and the regions which evolved some of those pristine states. So that's basically what the names of these 30 regions, we call them NGA, Natural Geographic Areas. I can explain more if necessary. So then let's take Upper Egypt. We take each of these points, all right, and we drill back in time from the roughly Industrial Revolution. We don't do things in the last 100 to 200 years, because we haven't got money yet to do that. We will eventually, but right now we stop roughly at the Industrial Revolution, and we drill all the way back to the Neolithic Revolution. So we're sampling societies between the Neolithic Revolution and the Industrial Revolution, excuse me. So here for Egypt, for example, we start with the Badarian. So this is the start date and the end date. And then we just go, try to break things up into 200-300 year chunks. Sometimes it doesn't work, like here, for example, quite a long period of chunks. That's not the problem, because we can actually, this coding scheme allows to capture change during this polities. All right, and then we go through, and now this is cut off, because actually, obviously, we go all the way to the Ottoman Empire, to the 1917 or something like that. And for each of this society, we code a fairly large number of variables. So here's the status as of February 2016. As I mentioned, we have 30 of these sampling points. We have 400 polities. So polities actually are our unit of analysis. The map I showed you 2 slides ago is a sampling scheme. All right, but the unit, the data unit, is a polity, which is I use in the same sense that Chris does, and I can explain what quasi-polities are if there is any question about that. So we have roughly 400 of such data points, and for each of them we have a list of 1,500 variables. All right, and of course, so you can imagine at this point we have 115,000 facts. All right, because not, of course, all there are many missing values still. And some polities are better known, and some polities are better coded. Now, this is truly big science, although if you think about the modern digital humanities, you will not be terribly impressed by 100,000 data points. Oh, I mean, everybody's dealing now with billions of points, right? But that's raw data. But what we are dealing with here is a much, much more refined data. And let me try to explain it. So here's, for example, what I mean by fact. It's not just 1 byte of information. So this is coding one of the 1,500 variables, which is population of the largest settlement, which has the short name CatPop, for Egypt, New Kingdom, Ramesside period. That's the polity, all right? So as I mentioned, that we are capturing uncertainty. So the population of the largest settlement is somewhere between 250,000 and 300,000 people. Now, where does it come from? So here's the actual a quote from a source, all right? Then here's another source which leads you to a paper that actually gives you quite a lot of details about what the Pi-Ramesses settlement looks like according to the best archaeological data, all right? And then we had a workshop in Oxford which involved 5 very knowledgeable experts on ancient Egypt, which went over not just this data point, over all other data points, and they basically told us, you know, that what's right, what's not right, and then Juan Carlos Morales was going to provide a reference, which he did later, and so on and so forth. So you can see this is one data point, but actually there is a whole bunch of stuff underlying it. And eventually what we want to do is we want to have this connection actually to be explicit, and it's possible to do. Our computer scientists, members of the team, assure us that in the next 5 years perhaps we will be able to connect machine learning to other databases such as this one underlying, for example, the excavations, resulting from the excavations of Pi-Ramesses. So the difference between billions of kilobytes and facts is that it's like drinking from the fire hose, right? or drinking from a nice bottle, all right? That is quite much more useful. I don't, there's probably a fire hose somewhere, but I need a gulp of water right now. All right, social complexity. Now, what does it mean? There's been dozens of definitions. We scoured through the literature and we tried to gather all of them. And so, basically, there could be many dimensions of it. That's actually a big question that we will be addressing. And so what we are doing is that we have come up with ways to code all the different aspects of social complexity that people have suggested. Now, these are the variables I will be talking about today in the analysis. Actually, we have this is only half of the variables that we are trying to code, but other variables are just not yet ready for the prime time. And so, basically, social complexity has many dimensions. Social scale, the population of the polity, the territory of the polity, the size of the largest settlement. Levels of hierarchy, how many administrative levels are there between the king or central government and the local government? Military levels in the army, priestly levels. Settlement hierarchy that you can get from archaeological data. And then there's a whole bunch of binary variables. So for example, for government, does the government involve professional military officers or not? Are there professional soldiers or not? Are there professional priests or not? Professional officials, bureaucrats? The examination system, merit promotion, other specialized government buildings, courts, legal code, judges, lawyers. So the idea here is that we take each of these are binary variables, 0 to 1, and then we basically look at the proportion of these variables that have ones, right? And that gives us a measure of the complexity of government, all right? So the light reddish code are the actual variables. These variables actually summarize a whole bunch of binary variables, but for the social scale, we have already quantitative variables, and so I'm going to use them directly in the analysis I showed you. 3 minutes, that's fine. Okay, so the question is, how many dimensions are there in social complexity? And if there are more than one, what are they? Are there general features and are special features of cultural evolution trajectories? Which world regions led the social development? That is an Ian Morris type question. And the data that we come, and Bob actually mentioned this, the data we use is quite problematic. We have lots of missing values. We just don't know stuff. And then for those stuff we know, often there is a lot of uncertainty. All right, so 250,000 to 300,000, that's actually pretty narrow uncertainty. Sometimes it's 4 or 5-fold difference between lower and upper level. And then there is disagreement. Different experts give you different answers. So you basically have to deal with all those problems. I won't go through the details, but the magical statistical technique that allows you to do that is called multiple imputation. All right, and so I actually, well, let me just say very briefly, take 15 seconds here. Basically, the way you do it, you construct a whole bunch of 100, for example, you construct 100 imputed data sets from your data, and you do it in this way. You sample from the data you know. So first of all, where experts disagree, you choose randomly one of their opinions and put it in your imputed data point. Where you have ranges, you use some kind of statistical procedure to choose some point, not the midpoint of the range, but anywhere in the range. Then you replace missing values by using stochastic regression estimate. So what this does is that it allows you to deal with missing values in a much better way. Because suppose you have 9 variables. You know 8 variables for this polity, but you don't know one of them. In a traditional analysis, you have to throw away that whole row of data. But with an imputed, with a multiple imputation, you actually can substitute imputed data and use the rest of the knowledge in that data set. All right, so we can, I know this is actually, you can talk a lot about this. I just wanted to give you a little brief overview. So here are results very quickly, and actually results are just hot off the griddle, so to speak. I was doing that previous week. Principal component analysis shows that actually a very interesting thing. First of all, the first principal component explains 77% of variance. That's a lot. And that suggests that there is really something like social complexity. More than that, if you look at the loadings, how much each of the different variables contribute to the PC1, you see that it's very, very even. So all of these things actually are related to social complexity. There is something. But it's not the whole story. There's at least two more principal components which explain 6 and 5% variance, and altogether they explain almost 90%, that actually have very interesting secondary dimensions. So look at this one. This is PC1. It turns out that it captures the difference between things like writing, text, and money on the one hand, and levels of population and infrastructure on the other hand. So there is basically a second very important dimension which actually allows us to look at things. And I don't have the graph. We can actually trace the trajectories of different regions in this two-dimensional space. And they do different things. Different regions do different things. All right, but I'll just show you the last bunch of slides. I'll show you, let's focus on the first component. So that's our measure. That's what social complexity is, basically. By our definition, it's a data-based definition, the empirically based definition. So here are some of the usual suspects. China, Egypt, Kachi Plain is North India, and Latium is, of course, in Italy. And so this is what the first principal component does over the period of the last 7,000 years. And you can see that Egypt actually seems to be ahead of China, but then China gets ahead. Right, then we have, of course, 30 of these, wrong direction. We have, of course, 30 things, but I didn't want to put all this spaghetti, thing on you. So here are some of the stuff from the New World, for example. All right, and then, we can look at, for example, what's happening in the Asian part, and I'm rushing through this because time is short, and also because these are all preliminary results. Here, for example, is West African thing. Notice it appears and just shoots to pretty high complexity in a very, very short period of time. All right, and here's more on the North America. You can see it's all down there in the, sorry, Mike, but that's the way it works out. That's what the data say. All right, just the very, the last, this is my last slide actually. Do I have 30 seconds, Chris? Sure. So, all right, now part of this multiple imputation procedure is that we use variables which we know things about to impute variables unknown. And you, of course, might wonder, I mean, can you really do that? I mean, can you really predict unknown values? And this slide shows you that you can. What this does, we do what's known as cross-validation. And cross-validation works this way. We take all 3 NGAs, or all the data we have in Africa, which is one of our 10 regions, and we take it, set it apart. We take all the rest of the 9 regions for all the variables, and we build statistical models to predict each of those variables given others. All right? And then you go and you predict the data on which the model was not built. It's called out-of-sample prediction. That's the true prediction, actually. All right? Then you exclude this one and do the same thing and so on for each of them. So in the end, you end up building a model on 90% data and predicting 100% of data out of sample, which is sort of a magical thing, but if you think about it, that's the way it works. And so these numbers basically tell you what is the proportion, the prediction R-square, which can be, this doesn't have to be positive. So these things they're negative here. We fail in some places. But overall, this is the overall for all regions. Overall, it turns out we predict anywhere from 48% to 82%. This is true prediction again. So these variables are really actually, they can tell you about missing values, and quite accurately, in fact. And of course, there is all kinds of interesting things. You can look which regions actually are more poorly predicted, which variables are more poorly predicted, and so on, but we don't have time to do that. And anyway, this is all preliminary results anyway. So, okay, again. So thank you very much, and thanks to all the wonderful organizations and people who made this research possible.